Hi, my name is Ben Deniston. I'm here covering for Matthew Ogden today to introduce the latest weekly discussion between Lyndon LaRouche and the LaRouche PAC slate, the LaRouche PAC endorsed slate of federal candidates. And so joining us today via Skype is Diane Sayer from New Jersey, Rachel Brown from Massachusetts, Bill Roberts from Michigan, and Keisha Rogers from Texas. And so with that, I will give it to Lynn to open up.
As not unusual, today's proceedings are new and different than last week's proceedings. We seem to have good luck in that respect. We never become monotonous because we're always doing something new or forced to do something new or something new is being done to us. All of these good things are happening and going on. Now, the point I want to emphasize today, let's not exaggerate the importance of the coming elections. Because what's going to happen is if you over-concentrate on the coming elections, you may miss the big action. Because we're in the process of a general breakdown crisis of the system. And Obama and his position in the presidency is not presently secure. Now, we can't say exactly what's going to happen, but we can say with confidence that the position of Obama is not at this time a secure one. Things are happening across the Mexico border and other locations, and there are also things being done, as in New York State and elsewhere, which, as in the breakdown of the leading banking institutions of the United States, which are now, in large degree, hopelessly bankrupt. So what's happening is, while we are running on a nominal schedule of events in an election process, we're having a different kind of process is intervening and may actually override the electoral process. So what we have to do is think of ourselves as warriors in a war, in which you may be on a particular battlefield one day, and the next hour you may be on a different battlefield. But the point is that we represent a force of influence in the process of election under very unusual conditions. This is the first time, and certainly in a very long time, that the U.S. elections have been gripped by the degree of uncertainty which is true now. Nothing is guaranteed. For example, the entire U.S. banking system is ready to blow out, and they're not going to wait for an election schedule. They're not going to wait for that. So what we have to do, we have to think of ourselves as warriors in a war, a special kind of war. It's a war which occurs out of the terrain of a purported pre-election campaign. And anything almost can happen. So what is constant is not the certainty of the election process. What is certain is the fact that we're going through a global crisis beyond all previous imagination in your lifetime or the lifetime of most of us of previous generations now. That's what we are. So you have to go on what is superior. Superior is the crisis which threatens to blow out the whole election campaign or the effect of the whole election campaign. What is constant is the war we're waging and should be waging to deal with whatever we have to deal with in the coming weeks and immediate months. So we will campaign for election. We do it very seriously, and the better that we do it, the better we do it. But do not assume that the results of this campaign, the primary campaign, are going to determine the fate of the nation or even the fate of this election. Strange things can happen and are likely to happen. So what you do is, on the one hand, you run for your election campaign, and you do it in a normal, capable way. But at the same time, you're prepared for something completely different, something completely shattering, in terms of things. Take, for example, the border between Mexico and Texas on the one side and Mexico and Arizona on the other side. You realize that there now is a threat against Obama, an objective threat against Obama's election campaign. He may be forced, with others, to admit, or his official representative may be forced to admit, that the whole election campaign process, from the primary campaign, which brought Obama into office, to the present time, has an element of farce in it. And that farce can blow up on the facts about the drug problem across the border. That, remember, that Obama was pre-selected for his candidacy for running for president by a drug operation, a British-run drug operation. That the states of Arizona and Texas are doped up and have been doped up since that time. And you couldn't believe, really, almost any election that occurred in those states at the present time. Because the drug factor, which brought Obama into his precondition for running for president after the primary campaign, is so saturated with drugs. And now that drug operation is coming back to haunt the president and his attorney general, among others, right now. So you could have an unpresident very soon, a highly impeachable unpresident, and also an impeachable attorney general, whose operation here is not really clearly known, just known as very uncertain. Now, at the same time, you have another process going on. There's a sense that this whole system is coming down. And under this system, there are more moves coming in the United States on the political scene to move in to upset the whole present process. We may not find a lot of missing candidates coming up in due course, or shattering results. We have major banking institutions which are bankrupt. As a matter of fact, the entire banking institution of the United States is bankrupt. It's hopelessly bankrupt. And what's happened this past week in that direction is pretty decisive. You have a similar kind of situation, but different but similar, in Europe. The British system is now caught in the maw of this situation. What happened with Russia vis-a-vis Obama has been pretty decisive. The president of Russia has made the president of the United States look like a sick fool out of his own stupidity or his own sickness, mental illness. You talk about the Democratic candidacy, this guy is not worth anything. He's not even a pre-candidate, really, in terms of status. He's a guy who should probably be sent someplace where he can live out a peaceful life without being annoyed by politics. And these are the kinds of situations we're in. The banking system of the United States, in its present form, is doomed. What has happened in the past week or so has signaled that. So therefore, we're in a completely new situation. We don't know where it's going, but we do know several things. That Russia is playing a very effective role, for its part, on dealing with the Obama question and its implications. The British system is in deep trouble as a part of this thing. The present banking system of the United States, in its present form, is doomed, hopelessly so. And only big changes can make things better for the whole financial system of the United States. So you have all these factors are coming in. And the things you're paying attention to may be the things that direct your attention away from what may be the most significant developments on the scene. This is a situation now which is not like nothing you have experienced in your lifetime. And I know your age, in each case, I can prove it. You have never in your lifetime experienced anything like that which is coming down on the situation right now. So therefore you have to be yourself more than ever. Be more confidently yourself more than ever. Be a fighter. Be prepared to do whatever has to be done as the situation demands it. So you continue running your campaign as well as you can. But at the same time, you have other campaigns going on, campaigns which anticipate a general breakdown crisis of the U.S. economy and the world economy, or parts of the world economy. That's what you're seeing in Europe, and that's what you're seeing here. So the trick is, don't get distracted by your campaign, and don't be distracted away from your campaign. Your mind has to be going in two directions at the same time. You're dealing with a campaign but you're trying to do that to change the way people think in this nation, not just how they think for the election. You're going for the whole pig, not just something. And so I would say that's the most important thing right now. From what I know, and what we have discussed around the table just an hour or so ago, I would say don't jump to precocious conclusions. Almost anything can happen. And be prepared to pivot, like in a good game of something or other. Be able to pivot quickly into the position you need to be in to deal with the next blow coming. That's my advice at this moment.
Well, Lynn, I'm really glad to hear you say that, because I think, and Keisha and I, whose primaries are both very close, feel this incredible tension between the pace of the election and the campaigning. Both of us are running against zeros, against Obama-ton put-up candidates who have nothing to offer whatsoever. On the other hand, the NATO conference in Chicago is on May 20th, which is even 9 days before Keisha's primary. And I had 2 meetings this morning with labor union officials, one of whom was just deeply pessimistic about what could be done, but who also was interested and who took the literature and is going to study what we're saying about NWAPA, also on edge, obviously, because of what just happened with J.P. Morgan. The second guy was funny because I made some jokes about the J.P. Morgan disaster and Glass-Steagall, and then said Obama had to be removed, and he's staring at this mustache. And he said, oh no, the LaRouche people, every time you start, you never finish. And I said, no, I just want to make a point. In 1988, Mr. LaRouche said the Berlin Wall, and he went bonkers. He was jumping up and down, threw the literature back at us, called his entire staff to escort us out of the building to make sure that we were not going to be wandering the halls and talking to any other labor officials. And it was such a peculiar response, you could only guess that we had touched a raw nerve, that it's clear to him as well. I mean, these are unions where 25 to 40% of their people are unemployed right now. They feel they're stuck. Their leadership has told them they're supposed to support Obama. They know it's insane. And his reaction was definitely one of total hysteria, terror, denial. But it was definitely interesting that what I was trying to say was that we are in a revolutionary moment. There's nothing that you can assume that the world is going to look like 3 weeks from now. I mean, there are many, many things that could occur, all of which will be dramatic. But I think the one thing we can be certain of is that we are not going to be in this situation for very long, because this is a turning point.
Absolutely. That's exactly the situation. Take the case of what happened with Obama in this period. What was done to him by the Russian president. The Russian president caught him in a trap. He was completely buffaloed. The fact that he was a faker was made apparent to anybody who was watching that performance. Even, I'm sure, this president, who doesn't have much in the way of brains, realized that he made a fool of himself in the way he tried to deal with the president of Russia. So that's part of the factor. You'll find that this factor is not only caused by the skill of a Russian president in recognizing the kind of fool he was dealing with on this side of the water, but that a lot of other people were not only aware that Obama had made a fool of himself before the nation and the world, but they were also doing something themselves to exploit the situation, as in New York State and in the banking situation in New York and other things. They are saying, wait a minute, this Obama is not invincible. He is not secured. He's vulnerable. He just made a big fool of himself on the issue with the president of Russia. And you will find that these conditions are not accidental, that there are people in the United States in leading positions who realize that the continued existence of the United States depends upon making a very big fool out of Obama. And you will find in the coming hours and days, not just days, but hours, you're going to find in the coming hours that the setup to get this guy ushered out of the office of president is going to go ahead. Now, the objective has to be obvious. You say, what's the objective then? You've got a clown who's the Republican candidate for president, who is an absolute disaster, intellectually and otherwise, morally and every other way. And there are no Republican candidates presently running as candidates. We can probably find some good Republicans who are not of that category. But we're going to find that Obama is likely to be out of office fairly soon. And that's the option which any patriotic American should want. We don't want to have this clown, the Republican clown, running for president. We certainly cannot tolerate having Obama running for president. And there are solutions for that, very acceptable political solutions. Obama can be made to look like a great fool, where even the Clinton family will have to finally come back to the position that this is a disease that should be removed from office. So these are the kinds of conditions we face. And what's happening with the banking system right now? The U.S. banking system is not only totally bankrupt, but you have a situation in which Glass-Steagall is suddenly being pushed where it was being suppressed before. Why? Because the banking system is going down. And those who cling to this banking system are going down with it. Now, some people say, well, who are the suckers, that they suck the blood of people, that is, they want to hold on to rescue. But you can't sustain any of these banks anymore. They're all hopelessly bankrupt. They have been bankrupt for a long time. They've been faking it out. Now, but you're going to find a situation where you have to push through Glass-Steagall, or this nation is going to be plunged into chaos almost immediately. And actions are being taken in a direction among certain circles which tend to affirm that some people out there, not in the woodwork, but in better places, are actually moving to launch the process under which Obama is dumped. If Obama is dumped, and the decision to dump him is made, then you don't have the problem with this Republican Mitt Romney. He's not a problem anymore. And now you have a different choice for President of the United States. And what I'm seeing out there are moves, and not just planned moves, but lawful moves. Things that just happen because they should happen. And the bankruptcy of these banks, that's it. So this is our situation. Our situation is we intend that before the election process of this year is completed, Obama shall have been removed from office. Mitt Romney will be a joke, or a bad joke, or a forgotten joke. And then you will have a movement for a new president who will be selected out of the remains of dumping the current presidency.
And that's the reality that the population understands, is that right now they see that the system's coming down. They see that what the objective of the Democratic Party local party hacks from Obama on down on behalf of this Wall Street and their Obama's British backers is to demoralize the population, is to have them not face this reality that the system's coming down, and to put forth dirty tricks operations, dirty campaign operations against our campaigns. But what they're realizing right now is they have nothing to defend. These local party hacks that are going after my campaign, going after Diane and so forth, they have no policy whatsoever to defend. What type of solutions are they actually bringing to the population? And it's very ironic and interesting that while one of these attack campaigns against me said explicitly that I was for a quote-unquote obscure banking policy, this obscure banking policy that they're talking about me defending is Glass-Steagall. Now, look at what's happening. As they're coming out in opposition on behalf of Obama for opposition to Glass-Steagall, you have now an upshift in the support around Glass-Steagall. You have the former Clinton Labor Secretary Robert Reich just come out and said, we have to have Glass-Steagall. The various other groups and organizations are calling for the reinstatement of Glass-Steagall banking reorganization, because now what we're looking at is something close to an upward shift of $20 billion in asset collapse from what we're seeing with this J.P. Morgan Chase collapse. So people know, they see this whole thing's coming down. This is something that we're going to face that is around the lines of what happened to LTCM in that collapse in the 1980s, 90s. So what we're looking at right now is the fact that the American people are now being given a choice. Are they going to stand up and fight? Or are they going to actually express their true patriotism as American citizens, as citizens of a republic? Or are they going to continue to be victims of the circumstance and say that there's nothing we can do about this? Because that is the intention of Obama. Obama party hacks would rather the population stay at home, feel victimized, feel demoralized, and actually do something about the conditions that we're facing. But the reality is that, as we're stating here, if people don't do anything about it, the situation is shown itself as to what's going to happen. What we're faced with is a collapse of the entire system coming on rapidly at the same time that we're faced with the threat of a nuclear strike and thermonuclear war, both which will have a devastating effect on the existence of mankind for some time to come.
Oh, look, make one modification in what you said. Don't assume, particularly when you're talking about Texas and Arizona, do not assume that the swing that you're looking for is going to come spontaneously. Remember one thing. Go back to the primary campaigns, which were being run for Obama, etc., back then. What caused that phenomenon? Why was there this sudden sweep for Obama in the midst of the primary campaign in Texas and also in Arizona? It was drug money, cross-border drug money operations, which the Attorney General of the United States is now under pressure on, and his indictment would be the elimination of Obama from the presidency. So you're not getting a spontaneous behavior among Texans, because Texas and Arizona are among the two most corrupted states in the United States. And the population feels the benefit of that corruption which they've received from the drug pushers. The drug pushers in Texas and Arizona are the biggest factor in those two states. And therefore it is not merely the popular, that's what motivates the campaign against you. You are seen as a threat to drugs. And the population doesn't like that too much, but they want the money or they don't want to lose it. They know that their money is coming from the drug trafficking operation. That's where the politicians are getting their money from. So what's happening is not the worthy Texans coming to their set of honor. They've shown their dishonor to you quite clearly. They know you well. They know you from the previous campaign. They know what you did there. And they hate you. They want to eliminate you. Why? And for whom? For their own benefit? No, because they're bought by the drug money. And the Attorney General of the United States is middle of that scandal. But it was this drug money coming out of Britain by known sources which bought the nomination of the contender, Hillary Clinton. So that's what you're up against. Now, what is going to rescue you? What is rescuing you is leading forces, political and related forces inside the United States, who have just announced the declaration of war against Obama. And therefore, now you have to expect to benefit from your part of being on the attack team against these SOBs that you have to deal with in Texas. If you put yourself in a defensive position and saying you're asking the people to come to your rescue, well, the people of Texas are not going to come to your rescue. They will if you kick them hard enough and kick their guys who they think are on the downside. If they think Obama's going down, they're going to be they're going to be nice and friendly to you. But it's only that process. How are they going to get kicked down? Because powerful forces inside the United States, which have been holding back and apart from their full force of their actions, have taken the case of the recent bankruptcy system in New York, or centered in New York, and they've taken that and they now say, this is the time, this is the way we can move. And so some political forces, which are known to me and which know me, are doing that. So you have delivered to you, in that sense, in that degree, in that sense, you have been delivered an option for going on the aggressive. And what you can do is you can say, well, drug. What do you know about drugs across the border? What's happening to our Attorney General, buddy? Do you know of anybody involved, say in the state of Arizona, perhaps, or the state of Texas, who might be involved in this drug trafficking across the border? Who might feel that they're benefiting from it? They don't want to admit it, but they want the money. They'll take the money every time. And when they take the money, they take you too. And that's the point, the distinction to make. Do not assume that it's the virtue of the citizens which impels them to do good things. That was a long time ago, when I was still young, when people still had a sense of conscience. When Jack Kennedy was president, you had a conscience in the United States. You still had a conscience in the United States when his brother was assassinated too. But after that, with the 68ers, the United States lost its morals. And you have, 2+ generations of Americans who have degenerated like the 68ers. And they don't have the morals of my generation. They don't have the fighting instinct. But we have people in the United States who have a sense of responsibility for the nation. And if and when they think they have the opportunity to defeat the enemy, they will likely do it, or they'll organize to do it. And that's what's happening. It's not suddenly that the people have come to reality. Yes, many people will come to reality, but as you know, the people are scared. They're afraid of losing their money. They're afraid of losing their job. They'll beg for something to let them live another week. The whole health care is still existing for them. They don't have a great self-confidence that they are the mighty constituency of the American people. They think they're the weaklings who depend upon kissing the butt of the people who cheat them. And they will continue to do that, like your Texas friends. They're so busy kissing the butt of their oppressors, they can't see the future. All they can see is that big butt sticking up in their face. And it's only when someone comes along and says, we can help save you, we're willing to save you, then they will get a little bit of courage. And that's the ugly reality about the American citizenry today. As I know very well from my experience, the present generation of Americans is very short on guts. And the reason they're short on guts is because they don't believe anymore that they have rights that they can assert. They will they will bully people who they think are weaker. They will join in bullying people who they think are vulnerable. But they won't fight an honest fight for an honest cause so easily. Only a few people will do that. And the good thing now is that some people in leading positions in various states and in the federal government are now preparing to take this nation back. Because two things, they think it's possible, because the credibility of the banking system is shot. The credibility of the predators is shot. And Russia just buffaloed Obama. Obama is buffaloed by the president of Russia, Putin. And that is what made the change. And never forget it.
Right, we had these two things coming out in the recent period around what you're saying, Lynn, with the announcement with the actions of Putin and also the interview by Walter Jones on our website, where he was saying that exact thing, that he's doing his part, he's laying impeachment on the table, and that the American population has to know their role in pushing Congress. Because in a sense, I mean, now you have a congressman doing part of what it needs to be done. It needs to be more, but part of what needs to be done, the population, now that they see that, there's really no excuse not to do something and not to fight for these policies. That's one thing I'd like to say. But just also another thing around this Glass-Steagall situation. Although it's great that people are discussing Glass-Steagall now, I think they'll find very quickly, as you've been mentioning, that if you get Glass-Steagall through, that's not enough. That's just the beginning. So that's one thing I'd like to put on the table for discussion, is the fact that it's not just a question of Glass-Steagall, because that's still, in a sense, a monetary policy, but we still need the question of Nawaba. And what we're also finding in the unions is Diane found this morning, and we found a bit throughout the weeks, is that there's definitely a bit of this drug money going through the unions. And I think the question of Nawaba in that context should be brought up as well.
Look at the situation, the way you pose it. What's the situation? What has happened? What has happened is the recent banking crisis in the United States in itself, and it's also developing in Europe. The French election is also a factor in this whole thing inside the United States. The Russian factor is very important. The Putin factor is very important in this whole process, because Putin faced down the President of the United States. The assumption in the United States among the population is that the President of the United States is the most powerful person on the planet because he is the President of the United States and represents, therefore, the weapons and other systems and so forth that people in the United States depend upon. It was demonstrated to them that that is not true. But the real thing was, where did the Glass-Steagall fight come from? The recent phase of it. It came from leading politicians, including Democratic Party politicians, inside the United States. What happened is, one bright day, day before yesterday, Glass-Steagall, which had been being suppressed, was now being pushed by the same members of Congress who had been suppressing it. It was not the people that moved Glass-Steagall. It was leading political circles inside the United States. And that when you have to understand the weakness of the population. You do understand it when you see it on the street. When you go up to talk to people, you find how many people are weak when you mention something which they normally would desperately support. They're weak. They're afraid that there's going to be a penalty against them if they say that. And now when people come out, like leading people in the United States, which has happened recently, in the past 2 days, and say Glass-Steagall is on the agenda. We need Glass-Steagall to save the United States, which is visibly crashing. The major banks are now crashing, folks. You've got to do something about it. These banks are gone. They're dead. You cannot afford to put your life at risk for them. You cannot pay their debts at your expense. You now have to get to join a big club which is going to shut these banks down that deserve to be shut down. We're going to get rid of this system that's been looting the nation. So again, you're looking at not the idea of sentiment among the population. The potential sentiment is there, but people often walk away with shame when they turn you back on you. They really are ashamed of themselves because they know that they really agree with what you're saying, but they don't think they can afford to be caught saying it. And this is so. Therefore, what's made the change? The change is where people are willing to think in these terms. What makes it possible for them to do it generally is when people of influence launch something, begin to launch something together, which says this is wrong. And that's what's happened. This collapse of the bank, this new collapse of the bank, which was thought impossible, and what's happened in France, what's happening elsewhere in Europe, has now forced leading circles in the United States who you do not normally talk to on the street, with whom you do not have confidential discussions. Some of these people have come out and openly and taken a position for Glass-Steagall. And it was sudden, and it was from the top down, not the bottom up. You just think about who did it, who made the turn. It was not done from the bottom of the population up. It was not a mass movement from the bottom. It was a mass movement being generated from the top, or some of the top. And that's the point I want to make clear here. That's why today, this is the issue. Don't assume that you're going for popular opinion. You're going to change popular opinion. And that you know what you have to do. When every time you're out walking and campaigning, you know that you're trying to change popular opinion. That's what you're doing. You're not trying to buy into existing popular opinion, you're changing it. And by getting them to recognize, the persons you're talking to recognize that they're wrong. And that what they were doing was not really in their interest. But their excuse was, we had no other choice. We're poor people, we're little people, we don't have these powers. We don't have the choice. Somebody comes along who represents more political influence, starts to attack the big bad guys, and the people who are running away and frightened become less frightened. And they begin to move. So don't assume that you're moving the masses. You move the masses by moving a section of leadership in the population. And by uniting with that section of leadership in the population, you find that you now have a force that has a chance of winning. But when you say, I'm out in the street trying to organize from the bottom up, that's the big mistake. You can often get people from the bottom up levels, but there are exceptions. And you'll find they're weak and frightened exceptions, or easily frightened exceptions. But when you have get motion going, actual political motion going, like waves of motion, that's real politics. And that's the politics I know well from my history. A politics which most people in younger generations do not remember because they never experienced it. And my job is to get across to people like you what your potentials are. We have people out there who are right now, in New York State and elsewhere, in other parts of the nation, are moving to throw Obama out of office and not to let Mitt Romney come in. For people who are serious people in the United States, the idea of the shame of voting for Mitt Romney as a price for getting rid of Obama or opposing him is a terrible thing to experience. It's an awfully shameful thing. You want to get rid of Obama, yes, but you want to get rid of this other crap. Just brush them aside. And the only way you're going to brush them aside is getting Obama out and then running through a Democratic campaign against Obama. And once you get into that phase, you're going to find Republicans as well as Democrats are going to come over to the same side because they're patriots. They suddenly have discovered what patriotism means.
Yeah, this past week, Dave Christie and I have been meeting with a number of labor unions here in the Midwest, and there's a really exciting response coming from a number of the people. We were just doing most of these drop-in meetings where people say, yeah, sure, I've got 5 minutes. And it ended up becoming an hour, 2-hour discussions, because what's happening, I think, is that in most cases, these labor leaders, typically what they will do is will basically try to find a candidate who is not going to sell them out from the standpoint of, we're labor, and you've got to stand up for us. And they often find that the guy they endorse, in fact, does sell them out, either from the standpoint of environmentalism or from the standpoint of the Tea Party angle or what have you, right to work and these types of things. But so, generally in the past, they would say, how much money have you raised, da-da-da-da-da. But now, because we sit down with them and they say, well, yeah, but don't we have to go along with Obama, even though it's so bad? And you're not going to really change things all that soon. And when you make it clear, look, there's a number of things that are really bad or could be really good that are more like that could happen very soon. And the idea of having someone different run for president that's not on there is, you might think that's unlikely, but if you take the scenario, if you take what's happening with the breakdown of the euro, if you take what's happening in Russia, and all of a sudden in their mind, they get the sense that there is, that you have to fight for principle right now. And we were getting a number of things that are just indications that people were kind of testing the waters and saying, okay, maybe now it is time. Maybe it's time for, LaRouche guys in the Congress, is what one guy said. Another guy said in response to NWAPA, he said, well, you know what? This country's been going the wrong direction so many years that I don't care if anyone in my labor union sees a dime from the construction of NWAPA. We got to do this because it's the right thing to do, and we need it for the country. So I think this revolutionary potential is there, and it is in this. I'm fighting in this principle over party type of response.
Yeah. Yes. Well, that's what this kind of atmosphere creates. The potential exists as a form of tension. What you privately believe, what you privately feel. That's one thing. Do you dare express that publicly? Do you dare express that as pushing your friends and neighbors to join you in that, arguing for it? And that's where the weakness comes. And right now, everything has been dumped in our lap. The opportunity has been dumped now. We have the opportunity to express it now. If we don't do it now, we may lose that forever. And losing that forever may be losing the human race forever. That's where we are. Because that's what the enemy offers. When somebody says they're going to reduce the human population from 7 billion people to less than 1, and you think and you understand what that means, you're talking about the extinction of the human species. Now, I can understand why the British monarchy would believe in that, and some other people would believe in it. I understand why they do that. Very few people understand that. I understand that very, very well. But for ordinary people who don't understand this kind of politics and what the motives are, this is simply a matter of, I have to accept defeat. I have to accept whatever happens to me because I'm too weak. I don't have the strength to fight these guys. And it's when some of us come along and have the guts to take these guys on and take them on under the right circumstances, when presented to us, that we have a chance of winning. We now have given to us a chance of winning if we don't goof it up.
Well, I wanted to go back to this point you were making, which I think is very important, on disposing of popular opinion. And I think one of the first steps in thinking about that is how we organize ourselves around this question of Glass-Steagall. Because now that you have more people who are coming out for Glass-Steagall, I mean, it can become a popular issue if the next crucial step is not taken. Most people say, okay, Glass-Steagall is enough. It's not a silver bullet. Glass-Steagall, as we were discussing before, has to be accompanied by the return of a national banking credit policy. And one of the things that I found interesting in terms of some of the debates and discussions I've been having with people, particularly on some of the radio shows that I've been on, is you see how corrupted people have been with popular opinion with this belief, and people will fight to the T on this belief in Van Buren and Andrew Jackson and the Austrian school, and just say that Hamilton was nothing but a British agent, and this is not just a political debate, but this is what this is what people are forced to believe, and they don't have a sense of the history in terms of this was a real fight against this whole question of monetarism. And so that's what you're really dealing with, and that's what we're dealing with in terms of destroying this British Empire. And so now dealing with the question of going against popular opinion really has to be, how do we get even the leadership that's now coming out for Glass-Steagall and the population who seems to understand the need for this to take up that next step, that next fight.
Take the case of where you had this little operation against you in that, the El Cap scene, kind of, in Texas. That, what were these people talking about? They didn't represent anything of any value to human beings. They didn't advocate anything that is human. They were simply saying, we are going to destroy you. And we're going to do it because our buddies and I want us to do it. Mm-hmm. What's that? It's like a gang rape operation, isn't it? There was no morality there whatsoever. There was nothing human about these people. That whole crowd, I witnessed that thing. I watched the thing, on the television program. I saw these people. These people were not human. They may have been human in some respect at another time, but on that occasion, they were not human beings. They were something much less than human beings. And anybody who looked at them should have been in horror that such people should live in the state of Texas. They should be so ashamed of that. They should run around crying, or mea culpa, that I even associate with people like this. They didn't. They're corrupt beyond belief. They're subhuman in their morality. And it is subhuman in that morality. That guy, that pig, or human pig, whatever he was, who led the charge, is just that, a human pig. Why should anybody want to be associated with a person like that? I mean, El Cap produced better people on his cartoon series than you could find in that whole place in Texas. And the point is the morality question. The morality question is leadership. It's not behavior. It's leadership. It is leadership that determines behavior. And the way to exercise leadership is to understand that and to proceed from that assumption. You're really like saving dead souls is really what you're up to. Particularly, then they begin to stink when they get like that crew you had displayed up there in Texas that occasion. Right? But the problem is most people in Texas are corrupt. And you know it. They're corrupt. I know them very well. I've had experience with them. They're corrupt as hell. And the only way you deal with that is you've got to decide whether you're going to take charge of the situation. And now you're going to say, how can I take charge of the situation? Well, my influence is not that great, but what if we get some more people who are more influential, and if we can get them to play their proper role, and you get a change in the people. Because the people in this country do not feel they have moral authority. They feel they have to wait for their opportunities. They're begging for opportunities. They're trying to feel powerful when they know they're not, when they know they're really impotent. And therefore, this is where the real politics comes into play. The idea of democracy, the power of democracy, is crap. It always was crap. The question is the inspiration of people to find in themselves the ability to express something they feared to try, even dare do before. It's like the soldier in battle. The guy's out there, he's got an honest soldier, he's going into war. He's scared like hell. But he's conditioned in the process to condition himself to expect to be scared as hell. And by understanding that he's potentially is scared as hell, he loses that fear. He doesn't lose respect for that fear. But it says, wait a minute, there's some things in this life which are too precious to be allowed to go wrong. And I'm one of the people, I've got a life, I'm going to die eventually anyway. And I'm not going to commit the shame of failing to do what I must do for humanity. And you get people who have that kind of temperament or have the confidence to share that kind of temperament. And when they're activated, they become leaders. And the principle of politics is not democracy. Democracy, as used as a term, is a farce. It's bravery. It's courage. It's love of mankind. It's loyalty to the human species. Saying, I'm willing to put my life at risk. I don't want to put my life at risk, but I'm willing to do it if I have to for the sake of humanity. And people who have that quality are called leaders. People who do not have that quality should not be called or regarded as leaders. And it's the authority of being a leader that you're willing to put your life on line to get a certain result that's necessary. Not that you want to throw your life away, but you have a purpose in your life, and your loyalty is to that purpose in life. Those people are leaders. People who do not think that way are not leaders. And leaders, success in society, our system of government, does not depend upon popularity. It does not depend upon these characteristics. It depends upon leadership. Benjamin Franklin, all the leaders of society. Look at the history of mankind. What do we mean by a real leader of society who meets the qualification I've just described? That's a leader. And what we depend upon is not democracy. We depend upon that quality of leadership. Now, people in society who have more guts, more devotion to reality, more devotion to humanity than other guys. Those guys are leaders. Those who do not have that quality are not leaders. And they will betray you every time when they get scared. So don't consider them leaders. Don't consider them as, the people who are all-powerful people. That's where they get the Jackson phenomenon. That's the Andy Jackson problem. And the United States, and Texas in particular, is full of that stuff. Yep. And I remember the Trail of Tears that Andy Jackson helped do, because they had a bunch of Cherokee Indians, and the Cherokee Indians were well educated, and they lived in a certain part of the southern states. They had their own language, they had their own schools, they had their own cultures, and they wanted to pull black slavery into that area. That's what they wanted to do. So how'd they do it? Andy Jackson helped that. And the Trail of Tears is how that was done. And the spread of slavery in the United States, in the southern states in particular, the Deep South so-called, was done exactly by Andy Jackson and company that way. And if some people talk about Jacksonian democracy, well, Jacksonian democracy is what this country has less need of than anything else. We don't need Jacksonian democracy, never did. We needed people with guts and courage and loyalty and care for humanity. That's what we needed, and that's what's come through for us every time we've won something. And that's the thing we have to understand in this election campaign. You're not begging for votes. You're kicking the shit out of anybody who isn't worth voting for.
Well, that is what we saw with Walter Jones just on that interview. I was very struck. You could tell that he feels personally responsible for every life lost in these unconstitutional wars. And when you know that you're putting that yourself, your actions are the thing standing between life and death for a few people or billions of people, then if that's something that's really in your gut, then you will conduct yourself in a way that reflects that. And I think that's what you've been challenging us to do as a presidential slate, and not a group of congressional candidates.
And I think you will do fairly well, but a little encouragement helps. I think she's...
Sure. So unless there's anything else, that sounds like a very high-level note to end on and some very clear marching orders for the week. And we'll definitely see what comes over this week and see where we're at next week. So
Good.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.